2013, the Minister of Finance commissioned a report from the World Bank, and he responded to the recommendations by adopting them. Some of the recommendations involved the IRBA directly, and it required us to become more robust in our oversight over auditors registered with us. But at the same time, it also expressed concern around the independence of auditors. But it wasn't just the World Bank recommendations that spurred on the board to look into how we should strengthen auditor independence. Our own inspections report that we issued in 2015 also revealed that amongst the top 5 findings, there were findings relating to ethics issues with the auditors. And of course, independence is a highly ethical issue. So there were a few reasons why the board decided to further to consider measures to strengthen auditor independence. The business failures and the audit failures globally, of course, had been responded to by oversight bodies, regulators, governments in the US, UK, and in Europe, especially Europe, with the 8th Directive, where they introduced measures to strengthen auditor independence, including mandatory audit tendering, mandatory audit firm rotation, and joint audits. And those measures had to be in the legislation of the European countries by 17th of June 2016, and most of them had made that deadline. The objectives really globally was to respond to the audit failures, but in South Africa we had 3 specific issues that we wanted to address. Firstly, clearly the independence of auditors, which became a concern to us. Secondly, transformation is a big problem, and although the profession is doing a lot to fast-track transformation, the results are not what we expect it to be. And the third one is concentration in the market. A lot of the overseas countries talk about breaking up the Big Four, but that is not South Africa's intention. And in fact, we don't have anything against the work that the Big Four does. The Big Four should be there. However, it's important that that second tier also is given opportunities to get and enter into the audit market. And of course, as a regulator, one of our biggest risks is that if there is a failure in one of the Big Four firms, if that had to happen, then the audit market would be impacted, and there should be other firms that's ready to step into that market. In any event, government's objectives really include opening markets to everybody, and we need to think about measures to do that and get involved as a public entity. So our objectives have been independence, strengthening independence, transformation, and concentration in the market. The measures that the board considered during its 12-month consultation period included mandatory audit firm rotation, mandatory audit tendering, and joint audits, or a combination of those. Or we could even implement some measures for some entities, and then for another industry some other measures. And the feedback from our consultations will help us to determine what will apply to who. A very important development in December last year was the introduction of the disclosure of audit tenor in auditors' reports. And the results there again were very surprising and shocking when we look at audit firms that have been associated with their clients for, I think the most extreme case was 91 years. And one has to ask yourself the question then, even if it's not a real independence, certainly there could be perceived independence. On the independence of auditors, we were concerned about the relationship between financial directors or management and the auditors, and also about some audit committee members and the auditors. And we found correlations of 18% of financial directors were somehow connected to the audit firm, 25% of audit committee members were previously connected to the audit firm. And even if they remain independent, there's still the perception that there might be independence issues. So that was a great concern to us. On the transformation, we looked at the 353 listed companies, and we found, and I won't go into the detail of the statistics, but we found that only 9 African black partners sign off on those listed companies, which 20 years into democracy seems a little bit too low for the number of African auditors that we do have, which are, to start off, not very many, but certainly we would expect for real economic transformation that these black partners be given opportunity to sign off on listed companies. The IRBA will never require that auditors that are not competent or skilled or don't have the capacity to take on listed companies sign off on a listed company audit. But clearly, when you register with the IRBA, you are competent to auditor, and the auditing standards will determine whether you take on a client and whether you can sign off on a client. That is determined by the auditing standards. It's important that the IRBA is not attacking the profession or any of the firms. We have a responsibility towards the public and towards investors. And it's important that we ensure that whatever we implement, we take into account the impact on business and the impact on the audit profession. But ultimately, our main concern would be how it impacts on the protection of the investors. Our responsibility and our mandate is to protect investors and to protect the public. And therefore, we need to, whatever measures we implement must be to ultimately protect the public. At the board meeting on 29th of July, the board resolved and took a decision that they will implement mandatory audit firm rotation in South Africa. They intend to consult a little bit further on the implementation and how it should be implemented, the periods to be involved, the entities that it will apply to, and whether there would be any transitional periods. So those are areas where we will still consult. But it was important that the board did come to a decision to demonstrate that they have responded adequately to the current concerns in the market.